It's one of the most highly anticipated theatrical productions of the year, The Man Who Laughs. It deals with the theme, the paradise of the rich is made out of the hell of the poor. Today on our interview, we'll be sitting down with Robert Johanson, who is the director of this musical and many other mega hit musicals here in Korea. The musical Elisabeth, which tells the story of the life of an Austrian empress, had its Korean premiere in 2012. At the time, 120 shows drew 150,000 in audience and won a Musical of the Year award. The musical Phantom hit box office #1 in 2015 and the following year when it premiered in Korea. Then there's Hamlet and Monte Cristo and then Rebecca. All these shows have one thing in common: they're all directed by Robert Johanson. This year sees another grand piece of theatrical wonder from Johanson. The musical The Man Who Laughs opened its Korean premiere in July, and over the last 2 months, it has attracted over 100,000 visitors. It is currently box office #1. Well known in Korea for all his musical hits, Robert Johanson is a veteran of the theatrical world, having served as the artistic director of Paper Mill Playhouse in New Jersey for over 20 years. So how has a star Broadway director come to set his eyes on the Korean musical world? After 10 years of mesmerizing works in Korean theaters, now there are fans who would literally book tickets for any show directed by him. The interview meets Robert Johanson to follow the making of yet another magnificent show. It's great to have you on our show. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
The man behind the much talked about The Man Who Laughs.
Yes.
So we're a few months in now. Are you laughing? How are things going so far?
Yeah, I'm laughing now. Yeah, it was a very big show to put up, and there was a lot riding on it. You know, a big investment of everything, money, talent, everything, and so of course when you first open it, we opened to the Seoul Arts Center. It was, is it going to work? Is it going to work? And then it turned out to be very successful. Now we're moving into the Blue Square Theater, and now we can relax a little more and you know,
sure, let
breathe.
out a sigh of relief.
Yes.
Now you talk about big investment. Now the budget for the show was a whopping 17.5 billion won. That's 16 million US dollars.
I know, it's huge. Yeah.
It's one of the largest ever put into a theatrical performance. So did it turn out the way you had envisioned in your mind?
Yes, it did actually. We're very lucky that I'm very grateful to the producers of EMK for believing in it and really investing in it this way. A lot of the investment went into the pre-production, having workshops and different programs to refine the material before we even went into rehearsal. So we knew we would have something that would fly. But then, of course, we had big production budgets because it's a very lavish musical. We have to depict the richest people and the poorest people, and there's a tempest at sea. There's all these kinds of things that go on in it. It's quite elaborate. And our designers are just fantastic, and they've really done their best work. It's just been a real pleasure to just see it come to life.
This story is based on a novel by Victor Hugo. It's about an orphan boy with a mutilated face, and it gives him a permanent grin.
Yes.
Now, do tell us more about the story.
Yeah, well, you know, it became the basis for the Joker and the Batman, this character, you know, from classic literature.
Sure.
And Victor Hugo wrote the book right after Les Miserables. He wrote The Man Who Laughs. There's something very compelling because the young boy who's taken in by this bear of a man who's kind of a medicine man, showman type, he takes in the orphan, and the orphan has with him a little baby that he's found, a little girl who's blind. So he has these two misfit children, a misanthrope, a guy that never really wanted to have anything to do with any kinds of people, suddenly has a family. And that's, I think, the core of the story that's so touching because of what happens to them, the three of them, in the course of this journey as Quinn Plain grows up and discovers, you know, the world and the disparity between the rich and the poor.
I know you had a sort of a moment of epiphany. You were flying back to the U.S. when you saw the movie The Man Who Laughs on your flight. Now, tell us about that moment and how you were inspired to turn this film into a musical.
Yeah, it was really an amazing coincidence because just before leaving, I talked to our composer, Frank Wildhorn, who I was doing Monte Cristo with here. And we had talked about finding a project that we could do together, a new project. And so I see this movie on the plane, not thinking anything about that. I just thought, I have to see a movie, so I'll watch this movie. And I was just seeing a musical envelop before my eyes as I was watching it. Because for me, a good musical has a really core story that touches your heart, that pulls you in as an audience. You have to have that. Then you have to have all the other things, the beautiful music and everything else, but you have to have a story. And that moved me immediately. So I called Frank the minute I got back. He hadn't left Korea yet, and I said, watch this movie on the plane. Watch this movie as you're flying back. He watched it 3 times, and he had 3 songs composed by the time he was off the plane.
He had enough time to watch it 3 times.
Well, it's 14 hours, so.
That's true, and he had completed, you said how many?
3
songs.
Yeah,
wow,
and actually
amazing.
all 3 of them are in the show.
Wow.
From his initial burst, of creativity.
That is a great story.
Yeah.
Now, I know you wrote the script, the draft of the musical yourself. How was the process?
Well, it was quite interesting because, of course, as soon as I saw that film, I went back and read the novel, which was quite different from the movie. The movie was very good, but the movie left out a lot that was in the book, and I thought I'd like to be able to incorporate more of that into the stage show, and there were some very interesting characters that were left out. So right away, I really, it's not based on the movie, it's based on the book. And I've done a lot of adaptations in my life. I've done Great Expectations and Tale of Two Cities and a lot of these big novels. So I'm used to how to condense it and make it theatrical. So it took some sorting out. It took a while to develop exactly where we wanted to go, but I made a scenario very quickly and gave it to EMK and got it out to everybody, and everybody jumped on board right away and said, we've got to do this show.
I see. So this production is conceived and then developed and produced and finished here in Korea, huh?
Yes. It's a Korean original production. We have international artists of all kinds working on it, largely Korean artists. But when we developed it through EMK, we were developing it with Korean company and to produce it for the first time and present it for the first time in the world to the Korean audiences. So it's very special. There haven't been that many Korean musicals of this kind. There have been a number of Korean musicals about Korean subjects. But now this is more trying to move into the market of an international type story that could appeal to everyone and around the world. And so I'm very proud of all the work that everybody's done to bring this together and to make this happen.
Now, I'm sure turning a novel into a musical comes with its share of challenges, I'm sure. What are some of them?
Well, we're lucky with The Man Who Laughs because it has a nucleus of characters. It doesn't have like 25 characters like some novels have. You can't put them all on the stage. Luckily, there are 6 main characters, and so it's perfect for a musical because that's just about the number of main characters you want. So you can develop them all in the amount of time you have.
Sure.
So in that regard, it was much easier than even the sprawling job they had of making Les Miserables, which turned out great, but it was very complicated because there's so many characters.
Sure.
So that helped. But I think I was drawn especially to his famous line from this is, "The paradise of the rich is made out of the hell of the poor." And there's a lot of parallel to what we experience now in the world. This big rift, this big chasm between the rich people and the poor people. Sure. So I thought in many ways there was a certain element of parallel universe that I wanted to be sure to create.
So like you said, you called Mr. Composer Frank Wildhorn right away, and he is best known in Korea for This Is the Moment in Jekyll and Hyde.
Jekyll and Hyde,
right. And he jumped right on board.
Yes.
So, I want to know the chemistry between, and you worked with him on a number of projects.
Yes. I had never created a show with him from scratch. I had directed shows of his. So it was a new process to see how we would work together. Frank, he kind of goes into a vein. He goes into I'm sensing this music for the character, and he then just sits down and starts composing these broad kind of musical landscapes. And then he shows them to me, many of them, for various characters. Do you think this is right for this? Do you think this is right for him? And the initial process is kind of a sorting out process of feeling that this is the right way to go. Then we involve the lyricist, and they start actually creating the material. When I write the scenario, I write, I glue the whole story together and say, and this musical number should be here, and it should be about this.
I see.
And then we turn it over to them, and they start to refine that. Then we all punch it and pull it and do what we need to before we, get it to where we want it to be actually something we're ready to put on its feet.
Well, we've actually been able to talk with the gentleman behind the music of The Man Who Laughs, so take a look.
Ursus, Quinn Plain, and Dia, Josiana, they're all written so beautifully, as only Victor Hugo can do, of course. And that specificity led me to make musical vocabularies for each of them. The emotions in this show are gigantic, the stakes are so high, and the people are put in such interesting circumstances. So I tried to create a world that was for the rich, for the poor. I tried to create a musical world that was the world of the carnival that Quinn Plain and Ursus and Dia live in, which is kind of its own kind of Celtic meets Gypsy universe.
In our musical collaboration, the music always comes first. Frank writes the melodies, which in turn inspire the lyrics. Also, a major inspiration comes from Victor Hugo's writing, which has an almost palpable sense of lyricism to it. He's able to translate huge concepts like love, hatred, indifference, life, death, eternity into sentences that speak immediately and truly to the human condition. I can only hope I did justice to Frank's melodies, Robert's book, and Victor Hugo's novel.
So tell us more about the protagonist, Quinn Plain. He has a complicated story, but a good heart.
Oh, he has a very good heart. It's very similar to Victor Hugo's Quasimodo from Hunchback of Notre Dame, that feeling of this strange person in society. We have a thing about people that don't look like everybody else and that sort of thing. So on the outside, he's considered a monster, a freak. But on the inside, of course, he's very pure. And the interesting thing is this relationship with Dia, who's blind. So he's her eyes. He teaches her that the world is beautiful. And then because she can't see him, he's absolutely beautiful to her. So it's a very touching thing that happens. However, Quinn Plain, the conflict, of course, is that this very rich woman becomes interested in him because she's always gotten what she wants. She feels she has this monster inside of her. That's the way she's lived her life. She's got this nature. So what he looks like on the outside, she feels is what she is on the inside. She becomes very attracted to him, and for the first time, someone rich and beautiful is not laughing at him. She's interested, or it seems to be. So he's conflicted. What does this mean? Can it be that, I can actually move away from, because he's in a carnival, he's in a group of people that are already misfits, and suddenly he has an opportunity to be out in the world with the real people, that society that tempts him. So a lot of his conflict has to do with that.
Sure. Some of the reviews had pointed out it was difficult to relate to Quinn Plain because you'd expect him to be a little bit darker and somber, if you will, but he had a very positive disposition, and he was very happy-go-lucky. So for him to have come out in the end the way he does, it's just a little bit difficult for people to relate to. What do you say to that?
Well, it's interesting. I think some people were expecting more of the Phantom of the Opera type character. That's not what Victor Hugo wrote. He wrote a young man who, because he was brought up in a loving family, has a very interesting outlook on life. He's very curious. He's very hopeful. In the course of the action of the story, those hopes get dashed, and things become more tragic. But he is not a tragic character to begin with in his own self. It's what happens to him in life. It's interesting just thinking about the many comments that people make, online now and everything else. And,
sure.
People think, oh, I wish it was this way, or I wish it was that way. And sometimes it's like, Well, it's this way. This is what it is. I mean, it
Sure.
can't be like this or like that. This is the choices one makes, and so everybody kind of likes to imagine what they think maybe it should have been in their own minds.
Right. People like to see it through their own
Yes,
frames.
of course.
Right.
Of course.
But the audience does say, contrary to the title, "The Man Who Laughs," it's difficult to laugh in the end.
Yes, of course.
Right.
It's a
So
tragedy.
Do tell us a little bit about the ending and the closing act, if you will.
Well, I don't want to say completely what happens.
Don't give it away, but
No. But in the middle of the second act, he really believes, because he inherits this this very strange circumstance that causes him to be, we find out who he was as an orphan, where he came from.
Sure.
From nobility, actually. So he thinks he can change the world because of that, and he can make a difference. And then those hopes are dashed for him because it doesn't work out, because people can only see what they see on the outside. They don't know what's on the inside. And as a result of that, various tragic things happen, and it does turn out to be a very heartbreaking story in the end.
Right. And like you said, the theme of the musical, such as social injustice and the social class, and so how is it dealing with such heavy topics in a musical?
Well, obviously you can't dwell in the mire for the whole show because people want to be entertained. There is that feeling of where's the balance? How tragic is the whole feeling, or is the ending the tragic ending? And my feeling is you want to be carried along on the ride, just like he is. He's hopeful. These things happen to him. You think, oh maybe this could happen. And in the end, it doesn't. But I find that most audiences don't want to feel, oh my God, I'm so sad and it's so horrible for the entire 2.5 hours. They need to be drawn along. It's like Romeo and Juliet when
Sure.
they first meet at the balcony scene. They're wildly in love and everything, and you do know they're going to die, but you have to be carried away by their young, youthful romance and everything, so that in the end you'll feel more touched by what happens to them. You have
It's
to have that.
essentially a love story then.
It is, yes.
I see,
Complicated love story.
Complicated love
Yes.
story. Everyone loves that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, it's getting some rave reviews for its set production as well. If you could tell us a little bit about that as well.
Well, our designer, Pil Young, he is he's an amazing up-and-coming talent. I mean, he's really made some remarkable things up until this point, but this is it's a masterwork, it's a work of art, because we really wanted to overlay the idea of the smile and the scars and the whole poetic quality to this. So the sets reflect that in a beautiful way, but then of course within that he has to show the very richest society, he has to show the carnival, he has to show this tempest at sea, a snowstorm, all of these things. But it's done very artfully, and rightfully so. He's gotten great reviews for his work. It's quite beautiful.
Now, the producer of the show, Mr. Hong Hyun, has some big ambitions. He wants to sell the show in full license. Do you think it has the potential to be making it big in the overseas market?
Yes, I do, actually. Yeah, we're actually, we take it to Japan next year. We go in the spring. And I think because of the nature of the story, it's a universal story. It's something just like Hunchback of Notre Dame or Les Miserables or Phantom that has an appeal all around, to different cultures. It's not just an Asian story or whatever. And so in that regard, I think it really has potential. It has great roles for great stars, and it has beautiful music, and it's a wildly entertaining show. And we haven't had a big new musical on Broadway for a long time that was this scale, like Lion King or Wicked or something like that. And I think they're ready for another, big carry me off to some other place kind of musicals.
Sounds great. You've produced so many mega hit performances, such as Hamlet, Rebecca, Monte Cristo, and Marie Antoinette. Now, how did your journey first begin here in Korea?
Well, it actually started with Hamlet. I had done this rock opera of Hamlet in Prague, and with the great composer Janek Ledecki. And our Korean producers came to see it there and wanted to bring it here. So they brought us all over. That was over 10 years ago. That now has played 5 different times here, and then subsequently they asked me to stay on to do other shows. It's my second home now. It's a very interesting chapter at this point in my life that suddenly I've had this wonderful Korean experience.
I'm sure the theater environment and the musical scene here in Korea has evolved over the years since your arrival. How so?
Well, it's been over 10 years now, over a decade. And when I first came here, the audience was primarily ladies. And young ladies usually, because in that time it was also more geared to their younger stars that they wanted to see.
I see.
Because the musical industry was so young. It's really a little more than 15 years old here. So learning about musicals as opposed to K-pop or performances, I think has been a growth experience. So over the years I've seen the makeup of the audience change. The audience is now mixed with men and women, all ages. And there's this group of very strong musical fans, just like you have sports fans and other fans for different things, who just are into it. And they love, the chat rooms and all the things about what's going on and all the little details that they find. And many, there are times when people will come to see the show 10, 12 times. We have people that fly in from Japan. They'll come like 4 or 5 times with the plane flight and everything.
Oh, wow, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, but they just... I will say this quite honestly, I'm working in Japan now too, and I know how it is. Korea has the greatest musical stars because the voices are just phenomenal. And people do come from all over Asia to see the shows here. And so there's not only the Korean fans, they're fans from other countries as well. So it's been, and I've seen the growth of that over the 10 years. So it's quite exciting. And when we have an especially big star, then you have the whole, the entire parking lot and everything is just filled with screaming people for the person to come out. In fact, sometimes they haven't even seen that show. They've already seen it, but they come back just to be in the crowd so they can scream for them when they come out.
I was going to ask you about an interesting episode that you've had about your working experience here. I feel like this may be one of the episodes you see.
Well, there is a little bit. Sometimes you have to figure out how you can get in or out and avoid the thronging masses, At the Seoul Arts Center, actually, it's tricky when you come out of when we're sitting in the theater watching the show, we have to get backstage, we have to come out through the audience, through the lobby and then get back into the backstage. But by the time we're out there, all of the fans are clogging the whole way, waiting to see, waiting for however long it takes for their whoever they want to see to come out. And you have to fight your way through to get in. That's really difficult. But it's fun. It's so wonderful to see people so enthusiastic.
Sure. It's good for the musical that you're producing.
It's good for everybody. You want to have something to feel enthusiastic about. That's what we love about sports fans. They get so enthusiastic. It should happen for all kinds of things. It's nice.
Right. You're viewed as someone who really understands the Korean audience more than any other directors, foreign directors. What's different about the Korean audience, would you say?
The thing is, I don't think they're really different from any audience. The problem is that there was an idea that there had to be a certain way that things had to be here. For instance, when I first came, I like to bring the action down close to the audience. I want them to feel a part of it. And when I first came here, oh, that's too close. Oh no, the audience is too close for the audience. You can't bring them that close, they'll feel uncomfortable. And it's like, what? Now we can't get the actors close enough to them, it changes. But there are certain, I've been directing since I was 12. So I've seen over 250 shows how similar audiences are, how similar they are in terms of what they respond to, what keeps them on the edge of their seat, what makes them really clap, whatever. And that's pretty universal. So these ideas that culturally people have to have it a certain way, I don't agree with that. I think that if you take them on the ride with you and they're along with the characters and all of that, they go with you, if you use your best tools possible to bring them along.
There are a number of foreign directors who are based or who do a lot of work here in Korea, like David Swan
yes, he's
and
great.
Adrian Osmond as well.
Yes.
Now, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages working as a foreign director here?
Well, I'm not sure how it's been for them. I know them, and I certainly enjoy, seeing them. And we haven't gotten down and talked like, how's it for you? How's it for me? Kind of thing. But I've been very fortunate because all my shows here have been through EMK productions. I think David or Adrian or some of the others have also worked with one company a lot. So when you establish that relationship with a certain company, you're part of that team, and you all. You're kind of headed on the same train in the same direction, which is very important. You don't want to feel like you're battling one another. That's always so disconcerting when that happens. here in Korea, from the very beginning, I can't praise Mr. Ohm and Sophie Kim enough. They have been so enthusiastic and supportive, and they want the same grand show for the audience. They want the audience to feel like this is something worth leaving my house for. This is something that's not a movie. This is really something that needs to be a live experience that we can all really remember for the rest of our lives. And they've supported me in all of that. And all the people that have come on board, our designers, our fantastic conductor, all these people, they have embraced it too. So I've been fortunate. I mean, everybody here has jumped on the same train with me. It's been great.
Now, you pay a lot of attention on casting. You
Yes,
apparently
it's
wrote,
crucial. 90% of your job is casting. If you don't cast somebody correctly, there's nothing you can do about it.
and
have to
you
get it.
famously wrote a letter to Im Sun-hye to cast her in Phantom as well. No, so why do you go that extra mile for casting?
Well, I've learned over the years, because I've auditioned thousands and thousands of actors, and I always feel that there is a right time for a certain person to do a certain role. And if I have that feeling about it, it's not intellectual, it's really an emotional feeling, then I will really go way out of my way to try to make that happen. And because I just have a sense about it. It's like a sixth sense. So for the producer, it's one thing. They go after people because they think, okay, this person's going to help me sell a lot of tickets. But for me, I want the person that's going to bring this character to life in a really special way.
Sure.
In a way, I don't want to keep hiring actors to do the same kind of role over and over. If I know that there's an actor like Young Suk who's coming up in Elisabeth, who is just a phenomenal performer, but has always needed to have that kind of role, that offer to her, that she's not always playing a certain kind of role. I really want to go out of my way to make that happen. And it's generally always really paid off, because it gives them a whole new outlook on their own lives and how to perform, and they learn something more about it.
So who are some of the performers you've worked with so far in Korea?
Well, I've worked with so many. I mean, even if I haven't worked with them, I know almost all of them now too from seeing so many of the shows. You know, I'm very fortunate that I know so many great people here. Ok Chun, who is probably, I guess, maybe the most successful female star here. I've done so many shows with her, and I met Junsu, who did our first production of Elisabeth, is a huge star. And he's returning this year out of the Army. It's his first show out of the Army, so we're really happy to have him back. And he's just great to work with. He's like a little impish character, you know, at rehearsal, and he gets everybody laughing. I mean, the list is endless. The range of talent, from older performers through up-and-coming performers. We have a new boy in The Man Who Laughs, who we call King Kong. He's newer on the scene. And he's phenomenal. He's going to have a huge career. I mean, already you can see it. I mean, he's building a huge fan just from this performance. He's so good. I mean, Park Hyo-shin is fantastic. He's always wonderful, and he has a huge following. They all come from different places, you know. They come from different backgrounds
right.
to where we are, and to see how they bring what they have with them, and then how they learn and grow in terms of how to create a dramatic role like this. It's been a great, wonderful challenge and journey all the time with these actors here. And their enthusiasm and their work in rehearsal is fantastic. All Korean actors are very hardworking.
Now, many of these actors and actresses are double cast or triple cast in some cases here in Korea. Now, what's your opinion on this?
Well, it's a lot of work. You know, we're not used to that, because in America, basically, it's
Right.
always single cast. There are two reasons. One of the reasons is helpful to ticket sales, according to their fan base, for the stars. But we have a lot of roles that are double cast and triple cast, because it's also insurance, because you have 2 or 3 really excellent people to play the role, and some of these roles are quite demanding, and you know, you couldn't really do them 8 or 9 performances a week. You know, the voice couldn't handle or whatever, and you need the insurance of someone that's equally as good. If you have just understudies for everybody, you don't always have that insurance necessarily, and the audience wants to feel, okay, I'm seeing someone that has some form of credentials in these various roles. So it's a lot of work, because you have to get each one to perform with all the other ones. So if you have 8 roles that are double cast or triple cast in any one production, you want to make sure that all the people that have love scenes get to play with all the other ones that have, you know what I mean? So you have a lot of combinations you have to work out in rehearsal, a lot of run-throughs, a lot of dress rehearsals, so they get to really, because you can't just go out there and you work out a relationship with each actor in terms of those intimate things.
Of course.
So that takes a lot of time. I have wonderful directing assistants here who help, you know, grab them and go over certain details if time is tight, so that the various people can all keep up with what we're at.
Do you encourage individuality
Absolutely.
in these roles?
Absolutely. I don't want a carbon copy. You know, they have to make it their own, first of all. I don't say, you say it like this, you walk, you know, no.
For all the casts, for all the double cast, triple
you have
cast.
So I give them, well, I want this kind of feeling. Can you try something here, try something, because they have to find it in here. I've often found, because although people are great at imitating and they can do that, but after a few weeks of performing, it becomes empty because they don't really have something that they're hooking into night after night to give it to the audience. We have audiences that come back and see all the various leads, you know, the double or triple cast people, because they are so different. And it's like, oh, this one, the way they interpret this number or that, it's quite interesting for them. And it's quite interesting to bring that out. So there are certain things that have to be the same. You have to do certain staging things the same because it affects so many other people.
Sure.
But especially when it comes into your solos and a more personal moments, there's a huge range, and sometimes even they have slightly different lines depending on what that moment is. You know, that express it, or the words are a little different, the wording, because it makes it more sense for them. We get into it enough so that we can find, you know, what works best for each person.
I see. Let's talk about tickets, the prices of the tickets, and some have complained that the tickets are too expensive because of the star actors and actresses in the musicals. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you know, for me, it's interesting because coming from America or from Broadway or England, I mean, the ticket prices are, well, they're not comparable. On Broadway now, you might pay $500 for a ticket. You know, it's ridiculous. Actually, it's become ridiculous.
Right.
I do think, unfortunately, that the star salaries have gotten a bit out of control, and that's something that's going to have to level off eventually here. I think in many cases the stars here are paid more than anywhere else in the world. So that's because of depending upon the fan bases and all that sort of thing. That's making a difficult leveling situation. However, there are always seats available that people can afford. But the seats that sell out first are the most expensive seats. So, you know, yes, they exist, those expensive seats, but there are seats in the theater that, you know, are affordable. They always make sure of that. So, you know, I think people sometimes hook onto the fact that that's a lot of money, but people are choosing those seats to pay that kind of money for, unfortunately. If everybody wants, you know, 10th row center, you know, that price is going to go up on those seats because the demand is there for them.
When you're working on a specific show, how do you make sure that the people on stage and off the stage communicate well together?
The one thing we have here that's really great, when we're talking about people working with the offstage people, all the crews and all the people that support them, unlike New York, for instance, where it's all unionized and people are on the stage crew that have gotten the job through their family or this or that, and it's just a job to them. The people here, they are family. I mean, the crews, both the wardrobe crew, the running crew, the musicians, all of them, they're like a big family. They're not just here to do a job. I mean, and I think the Korean system of working is to create a community, you know, so immediately that's the initial objective. So for instance, when I say, okay, we're going to go back to such and such, the whole crew just automatically resets right to where we're going. You don't have to tell, that usually in America you have to say, it's here, and you have to take 10 minutes to explain to everybody what you're talking about because they're not paying attention. They're just doing a job. So this wonderful dynamic between the artists and the people that support them, both sides, both ways, is really, really, really special here. Really special. And it's always quite moving to me.
Do you think that's part of the Chung culture? I don't know if you are familiar with that.
Yes, I think so. Yes, and it's beautiful, and it works beautifully for when you're working on something like this, an artistic project, because you really want everybody to feel that own it, that they have a part in making the whole thing a success.
Right. When you're directing, what do you ask of the actors and actresses? Where is the emphasis?
Well, it varies according to what we're particularly working on. When I first started working here, the guys would not really kiss the girls. Oh, we don't kiss like this in Korea. I said, but you're doing a European story. You know, this is a big love story. It's a passionate love story. These two commit suicide at the end, like Romeo and Juliet. We have to get the passion. Getting the intimacy of love scenes is the most difficult thing, and you have to be very clever and a little bit humorous about it, so they'll feel comfortable. Because this is it's a cultural thing.
It is
not
a
being
cultural
demonstrative
thing.
like that, but it's you are actors. You're acting. This isn't you. You're acting. So love scenes require a certain kind of approach, and then comedy is very tricky in another language. In Korean, the comedy that would work in English, because of the way the words fall out, is different. So we have to take time together to figure out what makes this funny in Korean. Do the words have to be completely changed because it'll be a funnier idea to Korean people? A lot of times a physical comedy thing is much easier because it's physical, it's visual, you have the comedy. So from moment to moment, it's really a dialogue with the actors, when we're actually doing the work in the beginning, how to get it to the most effective way for Korean audiences. And everybody's quite smart, and they all dig in and we all work together to find those things.
What do you do when you don't like their performance, for example? Just not getting it,
I know. Well, there's two ways of not getting the performance. One way is because you're lazy and you haven't really done your homework. And when that happens, I have to really lay down the law with them and take them aside. I don't tend to do that in front of people. But for instance, with our leading characters, I said the reason you're called the leading man or the leading woman is because you have to lead everybody. You have to come in with everything learned. You have to show them this is how you act. You can't come in here not know what you're supposed to be doing. You're setting an example. I've had to use that speech occasionally, and it works because it's like because it's like, come on, wake up. When it's difficult, when certain emotional things are difficult from the fine, for instance, like if you have to cry, you have to go step by step. You can't just say, cry right now, Although I make the joke sometimes, you're never going to do a Korean soap opera if you can't cry right now. But they laugh at that. But you invite them to the idea, this is where you're headed. This is where we want to get to. Little by little, try to find that place. For instance, I had a boy playing Rudolph for me one time who commits suicide in the story. And, I took this kid aside, he was young, I said, I know you're very young, you probably have never had any feeling you could tap into that would make you understand what this guy is going through. I said, is there anything you can relate to that can put you in that frame of mind? And he says to me, my parents died in an automobile accident.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, how did that make you feel? And he welled up with tears, And I said, that's what an actor has to do. He has to find those emotional memories. And I said, it's painful, but at the same time, it's cathartic. Same time, it's sometimes healing, because sometimes you're holding those things in anyway, and you have to understand, what it is. And by doing that, maybe it'll help you get through things too. And he then found that, but you never know where the answer is going to come from.
Now, you've hit the jackpot when it comes to ticket sales.
Yes.
What do you think is the secret?
Well, I guess I have this feeling I need them to leave the theater on a high. I need them to go out going, oh, wow, I had an experience. And the whole thing is geared toward that. For instance, not only the performance itself, but I feel the curtain call is also very important to make the audience feel that they can respond back to you and that you have this sense of, it's like when people do encores in a concert, and it gets you, so you leave the concert feeling, oh, wow, even though a few parts in the concert may have been a little this or that, but the overall experience has to make them something they want to talk about, something they want to remember. And I guess just over the years, I've learned how to find the way to make that happen through what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're feeling.
Do you think you've gathered what the Korean audience wants or the taste of the Korean audience, and you're maybe tapping into that as well?
Well, in terms of what we're doing, it seems to have happened. I find it's quite amazing because always at the end of our performances, honestly, always, there's this overwhelming need for the audience to respond to the performers to say, we loved you. And there's a lot of screaming, there's a lot of jumping up and going crazy. And so we've touched them, obviously, and they want to let everybody know they want to give it back. When you get that response from an audience, then you feel we all did our job. We gave them the experience, and they're telling us they had the experience, and this is what happened. So that's all I can say. I know that in the particular thing that we're doing, we've been able to achieve that.
How confident are you going into a show, or before the curtains go up, how the show will do?
I have a pretty good sense of that by now, having done so many shows, and not only my own shows, but seeing so many shows and knowing what kind of works or not. I luckily have not been shocked in a negative way here, you know,
Good.
like, oh my God, what happened? Some shows, although we know the performance is good and the people love it, some shows don't catch the imagination as much as other shows do. You know, that does happen. But I don't know, you just over time develop a sense. I mean, the job is, that's what you're trying to do. You want to get the audience to that place, everything that you possibly can do to make that happen. So
you've taken part in 108 Bow, the whole
Oh, I
ceremony,
did, yes,
right, with the
yes.
Korean crew. How was it?
Well, my niece survived. Mr. Ohm took me to a temple down south a little ways where his father's ashes were. And he always, you know, makes 108 bows before each new performance to,
I see.
you know, and he took me with him and we climbed the mountain and went up to the temple. And it was a beautiful experience, quite beautiful. And I really appreciated the opportunity.
How can more Korean musicals make inroads to the overseas markets? What are some of the hurdles to overcome?
There's a lot of snobby kind of prejudice from the Western people, like we're the only ones who know what we're doing, you know, from England or America. Because it's even hard for European musicals to make it in England or America. And it's simply a snobism. Once it happens, once that first show goes, the floodgates will open. It's just, it's not yet on the radar for those people. I mean, I would not have known till I came to work here how phenomenal these performances are here, and what I don't think even the Korean audiences realize how amazing they are in relation to the rest of the world. I mean, but I work now all over the world, and I see by comparison. And the work here, specifically here, is equal to Broadway in London. It's superior to Vienna. It's superior to Japan. It's superior to, you know, it's really I think basically the third best market for musicals in the world after Broadway and the West End. But it's not known because, of course, it's Korean language right now. It hasn't moved into the other languages and, you know, all those sort of things.
Sure.
But I think it's only a matter of time, you know, just like everything else that's come out of Korea, Samsung, whatever. You know, I mean, eventually, the K-pop, eventually people it'll be known.
You said you've been directing since 12.
12.
Tell us how it all began for you.
I honestly don't know. I had this teacher in school, I don't know how this happened, but I wrote, directed, and starred in my first show in 6th grade.
Wow.
And I had 35 kids in it, and the whole school came. You know, it was like this was the beginning. So every year they would ask me to do another show in junior high school and all this. So obviously I was going to have a career in the theater, and I went to college for theater. And as soon as I got out of college, I got in a Broadway show 10 days after I was in New York, and that was my career just started. I never had to ever go look for a job. It was very interesting. I'm very blessed. Where does that come from? I don't know. You know, why I didn't have a theatrical family. I didn't, you know, I grew up in Delaware. There was, you know, there was not a lot going on there. And it just happened. But it was always as though whenever I have done in my life these things, I kind of, Robert just falls away and I just go and do this thing, this show or whatever it is. In terms of the actual work in the theater, it's always been something that I can just do. I think that's true for a lot of musicians or sports people, you know, that this is the thing they do. So I feel that somehow along I got pulled into it and I just did it.
Okay, I'm going to be direct with you. What makes you a good director?
Well, I have to be touched by the material and I have to want to convey that feeling to the audience, or else I don't take on the project. I don't ever do projects that I don't want to do, that I don't feel that for. I don't just do jobs because I've been lucky I haven't had to do that to make a living. And I feel if I can somehow try to keep that honest thing, for instance, when I first read a script, I have to read it from beginning to end. I can't break it up. I have to read it and try to get that initial feeling I had for it, that I want the audience to have when they see it, because you're only going to see it once probably, and you want to get that feeling. So we have to have that to hold on to. Then I have to communicate that to the actors, to the designers, to everybody. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is what our ultimate goal is. All the details and everything will happen, but if we have this in our hearts to put across, then we'll have a better chance of success. And I think that guiding principle has been very helpful.
What would you say is your directing style, if you will?
Well, well, it does change a bit from depending on what the type of show is. You know, if it's a noir show, if it's a mystery show, or if it's a farcical show, or whatever it is. I like to do big musicals. You know, I've always made my career from being able to pull these big things together, which is, I think, the reason maybe I'm maybe more successful here, because I've had so much experience doing that. It's not easy to pull together all the design things, the acting things, the orchestrations, everything, but I've done it so long that I know how to communicate to all those different people what we need. Some directors, for instance, I've worked with directors that say, oh, I only direct the actors. I can't, somebody else deals with the tech. I only direct the actors. Or I can only really deal with the lighting or whatever. But you know, to direct a musical, you have to really be experienced in all those areas. And so that's what I try to get everybody feeling their importance and everybody contributing at their, you know, the 200%, at their absolute best. And we have great artists here, and the collaborations have been fantastic.
You've had quite a long career, and you've been responsible for more than 200 productions. Now, what would you say were some of the highlights?
Well, you know, I've got to work with so many, I've worked with so many artists, but I got to work with many of the really great American composers like Stephen Sondheim and Jerry Herman and various people. And I would work on them with shows where we got to work in person with them. It wasn't just we took their show and we did it. And those opportunities were very educational and wonderful to do. So it helped prepare me for when I come here and work then. I'm not afraid to take on a show and go and call up the composer and say, listen, we have some ideas, we'd like to try something different here, would you be willing to do this with us? So for instance, when we did Phantom, which is one of my favorites, the Phantom that we do here with Maury Eston, he wrote 5 new songs for us. And it had already been quite a worldwide success, but I said very specifically why we wanted this and this and this, and we created this amazingly beautiful ballet for Juwon, this great ballerina here. She's just fantastic. And he was totally on board, and because, I mean, I've been around with all these people for so long, I can just speak their language and get them excited. And that's, to me, like we said earlier in the interview, I don't want to just copy and imitate. I like to revive things and breathe new life into them when the opportunity presents itself. And so I've been very fortunate. I have so many times that I've been able to do that.
Right. You've been directing since 12.
12, yes. And performing, you know, I mean, a lot of my great memories were when I was acting on the Jesus Christ Superstar. And
ooh, do tell us more.
And I did a lot of Shakespeare, you know, I did Romeo and Prince Hal and all those things. Just a few years ago, actually, I played Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady. But, you know, those, I have found for me, it was wonderful to be able to go back and forth between acting and directing because it made me a better director of actors. You know, I mean, I really could speak their language. A lot of directors never acted, so there's a certain element of understanding the process of what we do. So that's been great.
Do you have any regrets? Do you ever pause and think, what if I had done this instead? Or
No, I don't. Not about this career. No, I don't have that. You know, maybe things personally, but not in the career. I've been very fortunate. And I think if we spend our life just worrying about what we don't have, we're not going to have a very good life.
Now, what are some of the challenges that you've faced in the Korean market?
Well, I haven't faced very many. I mean, it's been pretty good. The only thing that's getting difficult now are visas.
Is it?
It's getting more, there are more and more rules back and forth between our various countries. You know, and it's much more complicated than it used to be, and so many more times you have to apply. So being able to work internationally is a tricky thing. All of it, the tax problems, everything, it's quite complicated. So that part, the business end of it, is more tricky than the actual artistic end of it.
What are some of the qualities that a director needs to possess, do you think, to be as successful as you are today?
Well, it's kind of not about me. Some directors, they want to just come in and do it my way or do it this way. And I think once you really embrace the collaborative nature of our profession, it just makes everything so much easier. You have to get everybody feeling from the beginning that they have an important contribution to make, because they do. It's not phony. It's really what happens. I can give you all the stuff I've been thinking, but then you need to take it to the next level. And then we go to the next level and the next level after that as we build together. And from the very beginning, if you set that tone, you can do wonderful things.
What are some of the priorities that you have when choosing the next project? Show, company, money, people?
No, I mean, I just have luckily gone after things that, appeal to me, and I said, I really feel like this is something I need to do right now, or I'd like to do right now. Some things come around to you over time. When I first went to Vienna, I got this postcard, this famous postcard of the Winter Haller portrait of Elisabeth, the Empress Elisabeth, and I had it by my computer for years and years and years on my little bulletin board. And 20 years after I had been there, but I had it there, I didn't know why, but I just loved the picture.
Right.
Mr. calls me up and he says, I want you to direct Elisabeth. And there she is looking at me right as I'm talking to him on the phone. It's like, I guess it was meant to be. We're going to do Elisabeth. I mean, I actually had a refrigerator magnet of Marie Antoinette on my refrigerator, from many years ago when I went to Versailles. And then suddenly I'm doing Marie Antoinette. Like, what's that about? But anyway, there's a little bit of a mystical quality to all of it,
So how have musicals that you created affect your life on a personal level?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, there's no question that being surrounded by music of all kinds all my life has been a real gift. Because, I love music, and so many of the shows I deal with have beautiful soaring melodies and sweeping melodies. There's something about riding on that cloud of music that's quite wonderful. I worked for 10 years with the New York City Opera, and when Beverly Sills was the director there, she'd been this, world famous soprano, and she had retired, but she would sit next to me in the tech rehearsals, and she would sing along in my ear of the song that was happening. It was like, oh my God, I have this famous soprano. But nobody heard her sing anymore. But I'm very fortunate that I've always had music in my life. I think that's the nicest part about doing all of this, because I love music. Now and then, I can't sleep at all because the melodies keep going through your mind. You cannot turn them off, That aspect of having the music and these beautiful stories that we're trying to communicate, it's lovely. It's really nice. And I love being able to share that. Many of my shows have little children in them. And sometimes I'll have very old actors in them too. And to have that kind of tradition from the young passing on to the old and back and forth, it's a beautiful thing.
Do share with us your future plans.
Retirement? I keep threatening, but I don't know when that's going to happen. But anyway, well, I have Marie Antoinette opening in Japan in October. It opens in Tokyo, and that's a big production there. I'm very excited about it. And The Man Who Laughs will also go to Japan in next April. And then next year we bring back, well, actually this fall we're bringing back Elisabeth and Phantom, and then the next year we bring back here Marie Antoinette and Rebecca. So I'm busy here. I need a little break. This has been a very busy year. Just back and forth and back and forth. So
Sure.
I'm older now, so it's nice to have a little break time to kind of recuperate.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your
Thank you. This
time
has been
today. I hope you do get the much needed break
I do too.
in between.
Please.
All right. Thank you so much. The man behind The Man Who Laughs and many other musicals that have become huge hits here in Korea. I'm sure it's not the last time we hear from him. We look forward to many other musicals that he has in store for us. I'll be back next week. Thank you for watching.